On this episode of the WildFed podcast.
In the foraging community, we're trying to popularize all these kind of forgotten or neglected foods that are amazing. The logical conclusion is this all actually becomes fairly mundane.
We have a North American native crop of the highest protein nut, and it uses no ag land and no water and no pesticides, and we could be eating it as protein if I just leave it as whole nuts. Like, no one's going to eat it.
The men had two functions. They would come out to the fields and annoy the women. And then they did their own gardening right next to the homes, and it was tobacco.
Nicotine's not bad for you on paper. If you smoke it, it's kind of gross. If you chew it, I mean, hideous.
Darwin was blitzed. He was on the HMS Beagle just sipping that coca.
A lot of what gets called native plants are actually canoe plants that were brought there by Polynesian voyagers.
It was hard for me to find a plant that wasn't invasive in Hawaii.
I dry age fish now. I mean, that's something that I never would have imagined.
Consider the human animal. Consider what it's supposed to do. Pay attention to what lifts your mood.
Episode 164 of the WildFed podcast, all over the place with Tim Clemens, is brought to you by Surthrival. Man, I'm excited to introduce a new product at surthrival.com. We've teamed up with Hammond's Black Walnuts, and after a year of behind-the-scenes work, I'm proud to finally introduce Surthrival's Black Walnut Protein Powder. This is the most exciting new product I've seen in my 15 years in the health food and nutritional supplement industry. I've been using it for over 6 months every morning in my smoothie and loving it more each day. It fortifies my blended drinks with 17 grams of wild protein per scoop. But the story is even more incredible because the black walnuts in our protein powder are hand foraged from wild native trees. There's no fertilizer, no irrigation, no pesticides used anywhere in the process. No agricultural land is used either, so no habitat is disrupted to produce these nuts. All the foragers are volunteers paid by the pound for their harvests. In other words, when you invest in Surthrival's Black Walnut Protein Powder, it's not just an investment in your health. You're investing in wild lands, wild species, healthy ecosystems, and the people who tend to them. I can honestly say it's hands down the most ethically sourced and produced protein product ever made. It's also the cleanest because we use the same ultra-pure CO2 extraction process used in high-end cannabis extracts. This yields a light-colored raw protein powder far superior to the ones made with higher heat expeller pressing. It's a very fine flour too, so we've used it in more than just smoothies. My wife's been baking it into cookies and muffins, turning them into wild protein fortified snacks, and she uses it in her oatmeal at breakfast too. I'm excited to see all the recipes you come up with using this really versatile ingredient. Wild North American native trees, 100% grown and processed in the USA. Sometimes it feels too good to be true. We've managed to bring a wild, hand-foraged, native North American food to people in a format they can easily use to fortify their diets daily. Head over to surthrival.com to check out the entire product line and use the coupon code WildFed to get an additional 5% off your order. Surthrival's Black Walnut Protein Powder, the first wild protein powder on the market ever. Do you need an antidote to the metaverse? We just launched our newest t-shirt design over at wild-fed.com. It features our antidote to the metaverse tagline on the chest, a WildFed badge on the sleeve, and 2 tarot-style cards juxtaposed on the back, one modeled on the tarot card known as the Fool, who's wearing an Oculus and absent-mindedly walking off the roof of a building with a bag of fast food in one hand and a cell phone in the other. Next to it is a card based on the Magician, who's juggling 4 implements, a fishing rod, a rifle, a trap, and a foraging basket. It represents our belief that a life that includes the outdoors inoculates you against believing that an artificial experience of life could ever replace a natural one. You see, for us, being wild-fed, hunting, fishing, and foraging is about a lot more than just getting our groceries. It's an antidote to the metaverse, an act of rebellion against the transhuman agenda that is leading humanity to abandon the natural world in favor of wearing screens over their eyes to live in a virtual one. We choose the natural over the artificial. We choose an antidote to the metaverse. We choose to be fed by the wild. Check out our new shirt at wild-fed.com. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed Podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. My guest today is Tim Clemens of Ironwood Foraging, back for his second appearance. And this one is a lot of fun. In fact, I was enjoying this conversation so much that I had to pull myself away to make my next appointment. We kind of range all over a pretty broad topic set, just having fun and seeing where the conversation led us. I think you'll appreciate the outcome. Otherwise, I'm going to keep it brief today and let this conversation speak for itself because the grid is down here and we've been without power for a few days now. I've had to shut the generator down to record this due to the incessant grumbling noise it makes, so I'm recording this on battery power. There's a thick blanket of heavy wet snow bending all the gray birches and young poplars over, pressing their canopies to the frozen ground. They say we won't get our power back for another 36 hours or so, which is just part of living in rural Maine. It's a bit of fun having this disruption to modernity, but it also makes things like podcasting a bit more challenging. And I won't lie, I'm looking forward to a shower. One quick bit of housekeeping. We're going to take next week off from the show to focus on the holidays. So there won't be a podcast next Tuesday, but of course, we'll be back the following week. Until then, I hope you have an incredible winter solstice and Christmas. As the crooners say, it's the most wonderful time of the year. Yeah. Tim Clemens, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, let's real quick let people know who you are and what you do, and then we'll jump into our conversation.
Yeah, I'm a professional forager in Minneapolis. Been doing it for about 10 years. Yeah, pretty simple.
Tell people about your company.
Yeah, so I have a company called Ironwood Foraging Company, and I basically lead hands-on foraging workshops in the Minneapolis area. Teach at a variety of like wild foods gatherings. And I also have a small in the city homestead, about 1.5 acres with my wife. So getting some chickens next year. So, kind of do a little bit of it all.
Chickens are a meat weakness of mine because I like to eat game so much and have a good variety of it. But my wife is kind of chicken upset, always has been. I grew up an athlete and I think that was like the staple food. And so she was really dismayed when she realized there was like no wild chickens for me to hunt. And then, and then she realized that I wasn't willing to like night vision hunt the neighbors' chickens from their coops. And so she's a private teacher. So she, has one of the families we work with are organic farmers. So they provide us with, a lot of produce and stuff. And so she'll trade for chickens. And so we'll eat like, one every once in a while. And we ate one last night. And I've got this book, The Food Lab. It's a really fantastic cooking book. And so now I've got my like spatchcocked roasted chicken recipe down. And when we eat it, that's it. Like we don't serve any sides or anything. We just sit down and dig on a chicken. And they are pretty damn good, man.
Oh yeah, no kidding. I mean, I think my version of that is, getting the rotisserie chicken from the checkout at the grocery store. That's my weakness. That'll always be me.
That could be a strength, man. I think about so like when I'm on the road making the TV show, we'll usually be 3 to 5 guys traveling, and so you end up eating just like it's like that Whole Foods life or whatever on the road. So. Man, a chicken can be like a serious protein savior.
Oh, no kidding. Your road trips sound a little bit different than mine. I think even though foraging is such a big part of my life and gardening, gas station food is no stranger to me.
Yeah, I know I've been there too. What do you opt for at the gas station?
Oh man, I don't even know if I want to out myself like that. But like the sugar-free Rockstar, just to be tired but faster. And then
you're a psycho.
I'm a total psycho. And then I'll go to the hot sandwiches.
Tell me about your caffeine life.
My caffeine life is actually it only started, once I started dating my wife, and has only become more entrenched now that we're married. So it's like probably 2 cups of coffee, maybe 3, and then like I actually drink Diet Mountain Dew, which, in nowadays, if Mountain Dew came out, it would be some like beautiful, like kombucha level fermented.
You drink. Just can't, everything's so greenwashed now. It's really confusing. You look at products
ahead of its time.
Like, this looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I wish I could get down with caffeine. It's like not the fit for me, but yeah.
I don't think it's the fit for me either. I think like it's giving me like, I think there's like a nascent heart problem brewing. Maybe we'll see, but it could just be like severe anxiety from the caffeine. We'll see. I'm going to let it play out.
I've always held the position that it's, we really downplay its nature as a drug. I mean, it's almost like we act as if it's because what other drug too, when you step back, you're like, what other drug do they make sure is in your hotel room? Like you almost can't. This drug is so um, ubiquitous and available. It's incredible. You can get it all hours of the day. Like even alcohol, a lot of places like they shut it off at a certain point, but
Right.
not so with caffeine. And then when you were talking about Rockstar, man, I mean, I got to say, if I could tolerate it, I like a Red Bull. That's for damn sure. Like that's, I spent some time in Thailand when I was younger, and man, I mean, that's quite a high. But yeah, anyway, I think it's funny that people are driving around high on this stuff, and we act like it's no big deal. And I think people are so habituated to it at this point, even young people, that they forget how high they are. But you just like watch somebody go from stone cold sober and then watch them have a Red Bull, let's say, and then just have a conversation with them. It's like that person's high. And I know because
Yeah.
I've done it enough times to be like, I am blitzed out high on this stuff.
Oh, for sure. Like, I'll subject my wife first thing in the morning. Like after that first cup of coffee hits, suddenly I'm just talking about like whatever random topic, and
Yeah.
she's just like, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So true. I used to get cola nuts, the African nut that is for like cola is made with cola nut. So that's like the
Oh,
origin. The whole origin of Coca-Cola was cola nut and coca leaf. So those were the drugs. And I used to cook those down and make my own Coca-Cola with carbonated water and experiment with that kind of a thing.
oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, it's really cool because the coca high is also very special. And I mean, I'm just also probably not one I should do regularly, but luckily I don't have access. But when I do, there's a quid in my mouth if I am around any coca for sure. But
Oh,
cola
that's
nuts,
very, yeah, you're gonna be like Charles Darwin or Sigmund Freud. Like you're just gonna like publish
Darwin
something that
too,
changes the world. Oh yeah, Darwin was blitzed. He was on the HMS Beagle just like
chewing
sipping
coca.
that coca.
Yeah, man, I mean, it's a really special high. I find it personally a lot more stable of an experience than caffeine, but it builds over time. So like if you drink caffeine, you kind of hit a wall, I guess, eventually. Coca just builds and builds and builds. So by like the first part of the day, you're pretty normal. Second part of the day, you're kind of fiendish if you keep going. But
Fiendish, yeah. I
yeah,
hear so there's a large Somali population in Minneapolis. I think it's actually the largest outside of Mogadishu. And so there's a common coca kind of analog called khat.
yeah,
And I don't know the exact species name. I've looked it up before, but I've forgotten. Never seen it myself, never experienced it myself, but it just kind of trickles into the culture. And yeah, like just what you said, like khat, apparently it's like, people kind of have it in the morning as like a social thing, especially amongst the young men and like the middle-aged men. And then by around like early afternoon, maybe late as 4 p.m., like
yeah,
you're not out on the streets because they kind of become like these roving bands just like looking for something to get into.
yeah, yeah.
So it's
Plus
fiendish.
looking like they've been kicked in the mouth. I mean, what it does to your mouth, the cat chewing, like because it's like that maroon red, kind of almost bloody look of the juice in your mouth, and
Oh,
then
sure.
their teeth get so stained from it too. It's yeah, that's an interesting one because it's like tobacco in that my experience with tobacco, which now I smoke tobacco about once a week because my wife carries a pipe from a tradition that she's danced in a dance in Canada for 4 years and earned a pipe. And so once a week we have a prayer together and we smoke that pipe, which is great for me. But I grew up smoking tobacco, and I was massively addicted to it. So I have to be really, really careful, and it has to be in a pretty specific context. Otherwise, I don't mess with it. But because it's such a nasty habit, man. No matter how you use it, it's like gross. Whether you smoke it, it's gross. Your fingers are all stained, your breath is bad. People come in thinking they just snuck a cigarette and they don't realize that people like within 50 feet can smell it.
It's like blood. It's like I feel like a shark sensing blood,
Yeah.
what miles away in the
Right.
ocean.
Right.
Like I can smell cigarette smoke,
From so
on someone
far.
from like as soon as they enter the room,
It's
which is
crazy.
kind of funny to say because I've actually I'm about to begin my tobacco arc. I think
Oh,
I've
interesting.
never really been a smoker or a tobacco user, just very occasionally throughout my life, but I grew my own tobacco this year. So I
Oh,
grew
yeah.
Nicotiana rustica, which
Rusticas
is,
are the best, man.
yeah, I've never had it. It's
Oh,
supposed to be like
I call it
four
the
to
hammer.
nine ten. Oh, is it? Okay.
The hammer. I mean, it's like if you've been running around with a ball pin hammer, and then somebody hands you that Thor hammer.
Oh, damn. Yeah, Mjolnir.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You will know. Like, here's the thing: you will know when you smoke it. You will know that you smoked it. You will be
Oh
high.
man.
Yeah, you'll be very high. So start sparingly.
Very sparingly, because
Yeah.
I'm really sensitive to chemicals. So
Oh,
even
it's
a
so
normal
habituating
even a
too.
normal cigarette or something,
The
or
way
cigar.
nicotine weaves itself into your B vitamin pathways, like that, because it's a nicotine and niacin. That's the pathway. So
Oh, I
the
don't know
addiction.
about that. Tell me more.
Well, I mean, it's been a while, so I'm really rusty, but it's essentially, but I believe that's how the addiction works, is it kind of weaves itself through your niacin pathway. But, and it's, nicotine's not bad for you, and on paper, it's great, like when you look at test scores and performance and things like that, but, obviously it's so habituating. So it becomes like a slave driver. That's what I don't like about it. If, you let it get control of you. But my point earlier was like, if you smoke it, it's kind of gross. But if you chew it, I mean, and I'm sure there's plenty of people listening to this with a little circle shaped thing in the back pocket, but come on, ooh, hideous. Like when you're in a car with somebody who's chewing tobacco and they've got their little spittoon, that's gnarly. And then, have you ever messed with Hape?
No, but I'm thinking about making my own with this Rustica.
That'd be I would personally lean towards that as a method of using it, unless you can really cure it properly. But
That
for,
ship has sailed. I wasn't able to.
okay, yes,
But it's
it's
gonna be
green.
it's gonna be green and
Yeah,
rough.
yeah, it's gonna be rough. So the Hape, which is spelled Rape, with an accented E. But yeah, I have like a little. I'm sure have you seen those little pipes like that you can self-administer with?
I haven't seen them in person, but that you like blow up your nose.
Yeah, so I've got one of those. So like one tube goes in your nose and the other tube goes in your mouth. You drop the Hape down in there, which is ground tobacco, and I think the other really, obviously lots of admixture plants, but I think the most important is that there's some ash in there, so you have an alkali, and then you blast that up your sinuses. That's an immediate high and very clarifying. You sneeze, your eyes water, cleans you out. It feels really nice, but it's also a truly hideous habit. In the sense of like being social, it's pretty gross. So
Well, unless you get someone to blow it up your nose for you, that sounds pretty social.
yeah,
Your
it's
buds,
social,
yeah.
but then you still have the disgusting things that happen following that. You got to definitely carry like tissues around.
Oh yeah, I
Wow.
imagine. There's another kind of Hape like substance. It's called Itmik, and
Okay.
it's like the Inuit people in
Oh, no
Alaska.
kidding.
Yeah, it's all like its English name is black bull, and basically you do. There's maybe it's a gannet. No, it's a Phalinus species, I think, like some sort of bracket fungi, and you specifically use those ashes mixed with the Nicotiana rustica,
Oh,
and apparently it's just absolutely insane. But even like children
wow.
use it.
Yeah, a couple things about that occur to me as you say it. One, about the kids. It's like there's environments that are pretty sensory quiet, and then there's environments that the Inuit live in that are very sensory quiet. Like you could see being like, "Hey, give some to the kids, man. We're sitting inside here for the next 8 months." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
and that muffled, that
so
sound, like the snow. Yeah.
yeah, like inside of those igloos. That's like real. That's real, man. But also, what's really interesting to me is the trade networks that existed for tobacco prior to Europeans getting here, where the Inuit have tobacco. So you think like, oh wow, okay, this stuff's coming out of South America, and then it's making its way all the way to the Inuit. Like that's how important of a plant. I don't think that people fully appreciate the degree to which tobacco was fetishized around the entirety of North America and South America, on obviously Mesoamerica, where it's like Europeans arrived to a place where that plant had been elevated probably to the highest position of any plant across two continents. It's incredible. I mean, so much so that the Inuit have trade networks to make sure that they can have it. And then the Europeans like immediately get involved in the tobacco trade. And then to this day, the strangest thing to me, so whenever I want to get tobacco, I'm trying to find something like somebody like you grew, or somebody grew well. But my experience, and maybe some listeners will jump in and correct this for me, but everywhere I've been, for ceremonies hosted by Native people in North America, or, this is different in South America in the jungle that I experienced, but in North America, it's always cigarette tobacco that they're using, like commercial grade cigarette tobacco, even in ceremonial contexts, which I've always found really strange. Like there's, ever since the sort of European tobacco, it seems like they've always continued on buying European tobacco.
Yeah, I think it's some level of accessibility. I know in Ojibwe practice, tobacco is called asema, and it's used spiritually, to commune with the Creator, to as offerings, also as like an offering to people for their knowledge and their gift of knowledge. So it is common to give, like, even to just like, hey, hand over a cigarette, but
Yep. Yep.
also like a little elevated level of that is say like pipe tobacco instead. Um, but
Usually wrapped in red cloth has been my experience.
yeah, I think that's like a Dakota tradition, but I'm not an expert in anything. But yeah, I don't often. I'm actually seeing it more often now that people are growing Nicotiana rustica themselves instead of using, Nicotiana tabacum. So I think it's growing. I think
I
like,
hope so, man. I think
yeah,
part of it too has to be that it's controlled, like it's a controlled substance. So I mean, you can grow it in your garden, but you can't grow it and sell it. I don't believe you
sure.
can anyway. I think it's like controlled by the ATF, so or the BATFE or whatever they're called now, right? So it's like the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. So tobacco
Oh, they got
being
a new name.
yeah, they've extended the name as they reach their tentacles into more of the things that people like. But
True. True.
yeah, all this stuff is really fascinating to me. Like trying to control that substance, especially something that's got such a sacred, position in 500 nations, life ways.
Yeah, and so there's a book called Buffalo Bird Woman's Garden. It's like
Mm-hmm.
this
Yep.
thin little book, great read though. It's available online. I think it's published by the Minnesota Historical Society, but maybe other publishers as well. And Buffalo Bird Woman's Garden outlines the agricultural practices of the Hidatsa people. Could be Arakara, I forget now, but these are people in what is now like North Dakota, and they were an agricultural people, um, farming kind of like these river valleys, and they the writer Gilbert Wilson, he was one of the first people to receive an anthropology degree from the University of Minnesota, and he was doing an ethnography there, and his informant, his colleague, Buffalo Bird Woman, she was talking about how like the women garden, like corn and beans and sunflowers and squash in incredible detail, literally like drawing out the fields, how things were placed, to the level that they even said like, this is the shape that we put our squash seeds in the hills.
Hmm.
um, and then there was a little aside that like, where are the men in all this? And
Growing
uh,
tobacco.
the men had two functions. The first and foremost was they would come out to the fields and annoy the women, like tease them, get in the way, flirt, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then they did their own gardening right next to the homes, and it was tobacco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty. Yeah. It tells you how important the plant was. It's fascinating to me. And then you sort of look at what's become of it. And I think part of it too being that here's what bothers me about pipe and cigarette tobacco. And I'm not saying this in relation to the native use of it, just of the use of it in general, is that typically they extract out the nicotine to a freebase and then reapply it to the tobacco so that you get uniformity. That's what bothers me is now you've got like it's pharmaceutically treated essentially because you've got I know that the goal being that any unit of that tobacco is fungible so that it has equal amounts of nicotine so that you don't have, these leaves are really strong, these leaves are really weak. So then you end up with one cigarette out of the pack is like got no hit to it. And the next one is twice as strong as you expect. Instead, they're all perfectly fungible and uniform because they're extracting and then reapplying the nicotine. So, that to me just is like, it's sad because I
It
think
is in
it's
a
an
way. It
amazing
takes
plant.
a little
Yeah.
bit of the magic out of it. That
Yeah.
fungible, like, humans aren't fungible, plants aren't
Right.
fungible. They're not all discrete units that can be treated the same.
Right.
I think that's been the cultural arc for a long time. Hopefully that's changing. But yeah, that does take a little bit of the magic out of it.
Yeah. Hey, did you go to Hawaii recently?
I did.
Tell me about it, man. Where'd you go?
So yeah, Aaron and I finally went on our honeymoon. Um,
How long did you wait for that?
so it's been it was 4 years.
Oh, I'm glad you guys went.
Yeah, because we wanted to buy a house, and then COVID years, and
Yeah.
then this was the first year that we could go.
Hawaii was kind of hard to get to during all that.
Yeah. Oh, it was not happening.
Yeah.
And also like the vibes were off.
Yeah, right.
You know, I didn't want Erin to go to Hawaii for her first time and have it be under the specter of that mistrust, that general pervasive mistrust of other human
Mhm.
bodies next to you. That
Yeah.
that was such a weird aspect of those 2 years.
Right.
But yeah, we did. We stayed on Oahu completely and did some foraging, which was really cool.
Up in the valleys there.
Oh yeah, I mean there was cherry guava was peaking, so we found the yellow and the red ones, and then Java plums, which I didn't know existed. They were everywhere too. Loved those.
I haven't had. I don't believe I've had those.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're kind of astringent, but they're like intense sweetness and a little bit of tartness, like kind of washes away the astringency right away. So like
Yeah.
you noted it, but then it went away. Erin didn't think the same. she was like, "Oh, this dried my mouth out," and she couldn't eat them, but for some reason I could.
I was looking at on your Instagram. This is a little bit of a detour here, but I was looking at a handful of really wrinkly, ultra ripe persimmons, American
Oh yeah,
persimmons, and they looked so ripe. I was like, ooh, not very astringent. Those look really good.
no, those were like candy.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I got those from a friend
You hit those a week
southeast of
before
Milwaukee.
that, though. It's not quite as pleasant.
hmm
Anyway.
and I was finding passion fruit all over the place.
Oh yeah,
Those are just everywhere.
that's a really special. There's a lot going on with that plant, but that's a really special fruit.
Yeah, I found two different kinds. It was like the more classic round passion fruit that I'm used to, and then I found this one like a Jamaican passion fruit. Orange lilikoi is what they call it in Hawaii.
What a name too! I've always thought that'd be like a really lovely girl's name.
Yeah, lilikoi is a beautiful name.
Yeah, really nice name.
Yeah. Of course, we found all those fruits after going to the farmer's market where we had bought a majority of those fruits. And then I was like, wait, if we waited one more day, we didn't have to buy any of this.
That's all good though.
Yeah. I like to support
some
the
folks.
local farmers. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Yeah, that plant's cool. The leaves are an MAO inhibitor, right? So the little bit of pharmacology going on with that plant that's pretty interesting too. But I mean,
really?
as far as tropical sensations, when you crack one of those open, you know it, man. They're incredible.
Oh yeah, you know you're near a beach.
I'm getting ready to go back. I got 2 weeks planned with my wife, and I just can't wait. She's never been, and she spent so much time in the Caribbean growing up, especially in the Bahamas, and she's been to Jamaica a lot and stuff. And so, there's like Caribbean tropical, and then there's Hawaii tropical. It's like not the same. I just can't wait for her to experience that part of the world.
Yeah, a lot of the plants will be the same though. You're going to notice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it was hard for me to find a plant that wasn't invasive
Mm-hmm.
in Hawaii.
Yeah. Yeah. And something we covered here on the show, but I think bears repeating, is a lot of what gets called native plants are actually canoe plants that were brought there by Polynesian voyagers, but they get called the native plants, which is sort of a misnomer.
Yeah, there's like 20 to 30 canoe plants.
I think about 24
probably more.
maybe. Something.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, so that's like a whole, because that would be confusing to me. People would be like, oh, that's a native plant. And then I'd find out later, no, that plant was not part of the Hawaiian ecosystem prior to those voyagers coming. So I'm really fascinated by, are you familiar with like the Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson kind of Joe Rogan complex of thought?
I am I am familiar with that as like an archaeologist.
Okay, great. So I'd be curious your thoughts on it in a moment, but they're really always talking about the last glacial maximum, and so regardless of what you think of whatever how they relate, I forget what they call that that late Pleistocene extinction. They have a name, the Younger Dryas impact theory or something they say. But anyway, regardless of that, just looking at a map of the Earth and the last glacial maximum, you're like, oh, because I would be like, wow, people finding Hawaii, that's insane. And then you look at it, you're like, oh man, with sea levels a little bit lower, this archipelago extends all the way to Indonesia. It wouldn't have been as hard in the deep antiquity to have found these kind of places.
Oh yeah, I think people oftentimes when you think of like human movement, it's just natural on surface level to look at our maps nowadays and say, oh,
Right.
that'd be very challenging. Well, in reality, sea levels are so much lower.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, it's so
even if you go
fascinating.
back to like say take the island of Crete in the Mediterranean,
Mm-hmm.
you actually have Homo erectus remains and tools
Wow.
found there. Approaching, I can't remember the exact date, but easily over 400,000 years ago, but maybe approaching a million years ago. And um, the island of Crete was never more than 40 miles. Never less than 40 miles
So
from the
that means
mainland.
they would have had to have done some seafaring.
That was my assumption. That was something that really stood out for me in my undergrad.
Yeah.
I read a paper and I was like, oh man, so that timeline is correct. It seems like it
Yeah,
was.
and 40 miles. Okay, so we
You're
always,
seeing that from the like that's basically on the horizon.
yep, but
Yeah.
like you're not doing it on like a log, right? Like you probably have a
Yeah.
pretty decent boat if you're going 40 miles. You're going to take that risk. There's this tendency. What I notice in archaeology, as an ultra layperson, is that we always seem to start off massively underestimating the timeline of things and massively underestimating the intelligence of the hominins that we're talking about. And then as time goes on, the dates get pushed back further and the level of sophistication of their culture seems to increase. I mean, we started off with this idea of Neanderthals like knuckle dragging, and now we're like, oh, art and tools and sophisticated culture and burial sites. And now we're like, we're having to reframe everything we thought about them. And so
Yeah.
that's interesting what you're saying about Homo erectus getting to Crete.
Yeah. And we're just going to see that trend continue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly sure the seed that was planted culturally that made us all think that previous humans were dumb
I believe it's called
and
pride.
uncultured. Was it?
I believe it's pride.
Oh yes, yes, it is pride. I believe it's like interspecial pride.
We call it a race. You know what I mean? Because we refer to ourselves not as a species. We refer to our species as a race. And it's interesting when you think about. I had been writing this book years ago. I never completed the book at the time, but I had some of the artwork done for one of the chapters. And it was this cartoon illustration of a pile of dead bodies, and each body was a different member of the hominin
Yeah,
group. And on top of it was a Homo sapien with a trophy and a medal, and behind them is like this long road, and it's like the human race, because you know how we call all those different hominin species humans still, right? That's what hominins are. And
yep,
so saying a human race, it's almost like as if, and mysteriously all the other, there was that time, I think 100,000 years ago, there's like 5 or 6 different species of human alive at the same time. Now they're all dead except Homo sapiens, and we still are like the human race, like as if we won. I think there's
yeah. There's a
yeah.
level of that. There is like, especially when people think of evolution, they kind of think about it in Pokemon terms. That there's like this final, better, more powerful form that
Mm.
emerges instead of just different and adaptable, and that certain conditions led to the certain outcome. I mean, I would say that, depending on your species concept, I think it's actually fairly new that we call our, past members of the genus Homo human.
We'll get right back to the show in a moment, but first, I've got some good news about the WildFed TV show. You can now stream both seasons 1 and 2 on demand at myoutdoortv.com. That's myoutdoortv.com. My Outdoor TV is Outdoor Channel's premium online subscription service. They host thousands of episodes of hunting and fishing content, making this a great subscription service for anyone interested in the outdoors. But if you just want to see WildFed, grab yourself a free trial subscription and then check out all 20 episodes at no charge at all. If you decide to keep it, it's just $9.99 a month. We're currently in production for season 3 of WildFed, which should start airing around the beginning of 2023. Hey, thanks again for all your incredible support. If you haven't already, I can't wait for you to see the show.
That wasn't common even like 10 years ago, I would say. People were very much still in the paradigm of these are a different species. And I think they maybe still call them a different species, but the borders are kind of arbitrary.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
the
you're doing
genomic evidence is changing things a lot, right? Because before we had just the archaeological, now we have the archaeological meets the genomic, which gives a much bigger picture.
yeah, there was this idea, that there's this common idea, the biological species concept, that if two individuals can mate and produce reproductively viable offspring, then they're the same species, basically. That if they're not the same species, then the offspring is typically sterile.
But what about? Okay, yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, there are some exceptions, obviously, to that.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And so calling Neanderthals necessarily a different species, or calling even Homo erectus or Homo heidelbergensis, or, Homo ergaster, all these different species, and Denisovans, we're
Hmm.
finding Homo
Don't,
denisova.
don't forget the Florensis.
Oh yeah, Floresiensis, yeah, the little hobbits. So that's
My people right there.
yeah, those are so interesting. I did a deep dive into them, but this was like 12 years ago now. I can't remember, but they are absolutely fascinating. If you haven't
Mhm.
read about those yet, people need to.
They even had like the big oversized feet and everything, like what you see in like the Tolkien Hobbit stuff, right?
Yeah,
Their like
yeah, they're
proportions were
tiny
Hobbit
people,
like.
and yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we find, like, when we dig into the admixture, like if anybody wants to dig into this, who we are and how we got here, by David Reich. He's a Harvard archaeologist that focuses on like genomics.
Oh, cool.
Um, you find in the the genome of Denisovans, you find like a little bit of Neanderthal admixture, and then what we assume to be Homo erectus admixture, but we don't have any DNA from Homo erectus.
Yeah. And the
So like,
Denisovan stuff is still early too in the genetics, right? Like they're, because it's pretty clear now, like how much you can easily find out, like how much how much DNA you have from Neanderthal, but the Denisovan stuff seems to be early.
yeah, it's not trendy for the Denisovans yet.
Getting there.
Mostly because it's not, Neanderthals are represented, in non-African populations, and then
Right.
to a small extent in like northern African populations. But Denisovan, uh, admixture is only really represented in like some island chains in Southeast Asia, Melanesian populations. So it's not really
So
as marketable for them
not
to include that.
not yeah. Smaller demographic. Not
Yeah.
not largely. I guess I maybe I misunderstood, but I kind of thought that in the way that Neanderthals went to Europe, I always imagined the Denisovans going to Asia. So I thought maybe more of the Asian population carried that genetic line.
Yeah, apparently it was, this is outdated research on my end, outdated, reading, but it was my understanding that it's not really the same scenario, that like Neanderthals had a lot of admixture, and that Denisovans in, East Asia were essentially pushed out into
Mm.
refugia, and there wasn't
Oh,
admixture.
okay. Now,
Um,
do you assume these people would have been massively yoked because they were living the 9 ancestral principles?
Here we go. Yeah, I think that they followed the tenets to, an extreme
All 9
detail.
of them, so they would have
Yeah.
been essentially jacked, right?
Yep. Oh man, so I don't think anybody's surprised that Liver King was on PEDs.
I mean, I'm surprised that people were even taking it seriously.
Yeah, is it a fake controversy? I think, are people just bored enough to?
People want
They're
to
like, no, he
believe
said,
bad enough, right? They want to
yeah,
believe so bad. You see this in so many different, like, there's so many different areas. It's hard for me to bring any of them up because there's believers on every topic. So, but I mean, everything from flat Earth to Bigfoot to to all this. I mean, people just want it so bad, and I think people wanted this really bad. Do you think he set back the ancestral health movement, or do you think it's just like blow over?
You know what? I think exactly the opposite. I think it will fully blow over, and not only blow over in a neutral sense. I think so. Brian Johnson, the man behind Liver King, is a supreme marketing genius. He's methodical, he's detail oriented, and his social battery is almost unrivaled.
He could have been a little bit more discreet with some of the emails he sent, though. That was that wasn't
Oh
very
yeah,
good
I mean,
foresight. He
does
sent them to more
Liver King
plates, more
screams
dates guy,
discreet,
Derek, right?
right? It just screams discretion.
Yeah.
I think he will actually emerge more powerful for it. And I actually, so I wasn't ever a fan of his. Not really a detractor, because like I feel like I knew the game. Like, of course he's on multiple PEDs, performance enhancing drugs. I didn't understand how anybody could look at him and think that he wasn't. But that's also the layman, people do want to believe. So
Yeah, but dude, I mean, how many people do you know that work out and work out hard and diligently? And how many people in the ancestral health world also work out? And like, you can't look, that's not a human possibility. It's just not. It's
it's
just
not.
not possible to look like that without gear. You just cannot do it. No matter,
Well,
I don't care who you are, how good your genetics, and how early you started training, you cannot maintain. And that's not hate, man, because I personally wish they would legalize these drugs. And since everyone's using them culturally, I don't understand why we were playing this charade. And I also don't think you take those drugs and you just get that physique. That is hard work and dedication, grind, consistency that built him that physique. And, those drugs, though, allowed it to go to a level that just, I mean, come on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think this phenomena, really speaks to the zeitgeist, the spirit of our times. Like, most people don't work out. Most people in the United States qualify, as obese or, some designation close to that, overweight at least. So most people aren't working out. They're not familiar with what a body looks like when working out for years or any amount of time. So I think, yeah, he was able to capture the limelight that he did by just pure ignorance from a lot of people.
Have you watched any of his apology interviews? Not just his video, but his interviews. Did you see him on Patrick Bet-David's show, Valuetainment?
I didn't. I was aware that he was kind of doing the podcast circuit,
Yeah.
kind of apologizing, and I saw like his story that he posted on Instagram, and fine. I think it would have. I think it's good. I think he's handling it well, and like you, I do agree that these, as long as someone's not competing under the
guise of not using them.
Yeah, as long as someone's not doing that, if you're just an individual that wants to do that, I don't have a problem with that.
It's funny though, because now let's see how deftly I can handle this, which is probably not that deftly, but there are certain categories that one could enter into in the sports realm that are patently unfair currently due to one's hormones levels. And you could be celebrated and not considered a cheater at all, even though you have jacked up androgen hormones for your category. And yet, if you wanted to like take those exogenously, it's just very strange to me that we're in a funny moment here with this. The other thing I think too that bears mentioning is, okay, so obviously pro bodybuilding at the highest levels, that's a PED game. I mean, again, but you can't look like that. That's just not achievable naturally. But then it's in our movies. So all of our superheroes, male and female, right? They're taking these drugs. I've been pretty involved in CrossFit recently. And so, there's another world where, I mean, so the athletes at the very top of that, it's pretty suspect the way they look. I mean, you just find it everywhere you go. Pornography, another great example of a place where PEDs are being used. So what ends up happening is that everywhere, we're seeing PED physiques all around us, and it's making things very confusing. And the one thing I would say about Liver King's apology that was really kind of hard to hear was he was like, well, I did this to help all those kids who are going to commit suicide because of how they feel about themselves. And it's like, yeah, but a lot of how they feel about themselves body image based. And that's because they're seeing people with impossible physiques. So then you cultivate an impossible physique, tell people it's natural, and you think that's going to help those people.
That's a really good point.
I think that's actually, and the other thing, so his wife had, I guess, I'd watched this interview on Valuetainment. So his wife had come to the studio with him, and he had mentioned at one point she had just turned 50. And all the guys were like, wow, your wife is 50? She looks amazing. So I started looking up pictures of her because me and my wife are in our mid 40s. And so when we see older folks than us who look great, that's like huge inspiration to us, because we're past that point of like living off of our youthful hormones or whatever. We are having to, be much more thoughtful about our lifestyle to age well. So I was like, wow, she's 50. She looks amazing. And I was like, I took a screenshot. I was going to show my wife, because I thought she would appreciate it. And then I was like, wait, how could I possibly believe this guy now? That's it's like, sorry, delete. Like that doesn't make any sense. So I don't know, man. I'm not sure. You think he's going to go on to become, he'll transcend this?
I think so.
You don't,
Because
because Milli Vanilli wasn't able to. And when I saw that, I was like, this guy's Milli Vanilli. You
I
remember
think
that?
people, I don't. I don't know who Milli Vanilli is. But,
Oh, you don't really?
I'm
How old
an
are you?
uncultured swine. I just turned 34.
Wow, that's crazy. Milli Vanilli were these, it was this 2-guy act. They were 2 black dudes, I think I want to say they had really intense accents. Anyway, they had beautiful bodies and this like really cool long braids in their hair. And they looked super jacked. And must have been the late 80s or early 90s, probably. They were this music act, and turned out they won what award do you win for music? I don't know if it was a
Grammy.
Yeah, they won one, and then it turned out they had lip synced the whole thing, and so they lost the award, and they became like the laughing stock of the music industry for a while. And then they tried to come back by doing their own music, but they were terrible singers. They were just good dancer lip syncer guys, they were good performers.
Okay.
So to me, when I saw this, it was like remembering them. One ended up going on to kill himself. It was really horrible.
Oh
The
God.
story
Yeah.
played out really badly, but
I
anyway.
think people were more. I think people were more earnest back then. Like within my lifetime, I can see the transition, like kind of a pre-internet, or at least pre-very popular internet, social media, etc. People were more earnest. Like strict, almost what you want to say, like just empiricism was more important. Like things had to have literal cause and effects, and there were like nowadays, someone like Liver King, or a very popular mushroom seller, for another example, they can kind of get by on like the spirit of what they're saying and not the letter.
I love that little innuendo you just made.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say too much because the Portobello Mafia is gonna come after me.
Yeah,
probably,
of course. But wow, I'm interested to see. I really wish that, as an advocate for organ meats, I wish that I hope that this stigma doesn't stick too long. I remember seeing videos of him early on, because I remember when there was like a lot of buzz around him. Now that I see how he crafted all of that, it's really like you said, good marketing, brilliant marketing. But I remember videos of him like having like 15 chains around his neck, and he's like got a backpack, and he's pulling a weight sled, and he's got the kettlebell in each hand. You know what I mean? Like he's fully like weighed down with iron, and he's like walking down the street. And I was like, what does this have to do with ancestral anything? Obviously, to look like that, you're in the gym like most of the day.
It's also spectacle, though. Like, I think to some degree, like so I kind of think I've grown into this thought, and it's still developing, but I think people like Liver King, and I'm just going to say it, Paul Stamets, they are better anthropologists than anthropologists. And because a lot of the anthropologists I knew or know, they would not be able to pull off something so aware of the levers that move a human's spirit or their intellect, and moves them to action, whether that's to buy a product or to better themselves, get out of bed and exercise discipline. Then Liver King or Paul Stamets, like these anthropologists who claim to be like these experts in what makes a human wouldn't be capable of that. Mm-hmm. So I do respect the marketers in general are better anthropologists than anthropologists, because they know humans on like this fundamental level.
Or psychologists, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's a gift for sure. And I think that spectacle draws people.
Not necessarily to the culture.
Yeah. I mean, maybe because it's almost like the tension between like suffering and pleasure. Like things can't always be good or else things get bad, and things can't always be bad or else things get bad.
Yeah.
And so like it's almost like, Liver King walks this line of, he did technically lie, but only to the people who were like the most gullible. You can't, like, again, like the most uninitiated human beings alive in this realm are the people that believed him. But his message would probably not have reached them. It just would have been like another fitness echo chamber guy,
Right.
Who didn't have a broad, appeal, like cross population appeal. Telling his message. But this way, the spectacle allowed him to like get to these people, right?
If you
So he might be helping more people.
If you see a guy with that bright red of a chest,
oh, dude, he looked like a hot dog.
A totally red hot dog. I gotta say too, for anybody who's been around bodybuilders or fitness competition people, you see all those photos you see of them. Same with our actors and stuff. All those photos you see are from like a 1 month period when they're in really, really, really good shape, and then they get fatter for the rest of the year. But he was walking around maintaining that physique, walking around shirtless everywhere he went in public. That was impressive to me, because again, like, people put too much on the PEDs as if, like, oh yeah, but he was on steroids. It's like, yeah, but I mean, you don't just take it's like Lance Armstrong was on steroids, but like, he didn't look like that. Like, you don't just look like that, right? So that's right. Diet, nutrition, rest, everything being optimized. But then to maintain the physique is impressive. That's impressive to me. That's obviously a tremendous amount of dedication. So I don't want to try to take that away from him. And also, I think it's really easy too to try to create these simple, because look at my product line, for instance. So I do the pine pollen products, in particular, here we go, real alliteration. In particular, I do the pine pollen pure potency. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. That included my pure potency. So we do that product because there's testosterone in it, and we put it with nettle root because of nettle root's ability to free testosterone in the blood. So is that a performance enhancing drug? I mean, they're two herbs, like, how do you categorize that? Or we do, so like, let's say someone like Liver King is taking growth hormone and IGF-1. Well, we do our elk antler extract because of the high levels of IGF-1 and other growth factors, but that's a food. I mean, it's the antlers off of an animal you could hunt. It's just a food. But so like, it's not like it's a clean thing where it's like, this is a drug, and everything else is natural. It's a spectrum of things. And then you have hardcore stuff on one end where you're like, that's a full steroid. And then you have these like peptides, let's say, on the low end, which are like, you can get away with them in a lot of the tests because, they're pretty easy to get around the testing. They are still very powerful, but you wouldn't call them full steroids. So it's not like athletes are either doing it or they're not. There's like they're doing it in a whole range of gray area too. And then I think personally, if you went into a GNC, there's plenty of stuff in there that's like, this is legal, but it's not exactly like a natural substance.
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff in your regular GNC that is banned by, several, sports bodies for use. I think it's definitely a spectrum, as you said. Like, it's contextual.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people, like, just like you said, food, like, there's this common saying, let food be thy medicine. It's often attributed to Hippocrates. He actually didn't say it. It was a paraphrase, but it was a good paraphrase. He actually, his whole thrust was diatomasi, or dietetics, and it meant a lifestyle regime. And that included exercise. Too often we kind of limit it to like what we can consume, like food or medicine, because we're in a very consumer-driven culture. And we think naturally that the answer is consume, consume, consume. But really, I think a lot of what is called for nowadays is to expend more of yourself.
Yes.
So like, that lifestyle regime, or diatomisi, that included exercise, specifically walking. And, walking, unless someone's completely unable to, unfortunately, that's a very easy way for people to, better their life. I think all too often, especially even in the foraging community, it's all centered on like consuming, like, what food can I consume, rather than like, can I walk, or can I get to the gym to increase my bone density and tendon strength, cardiovascular strength?
Cardio is a weapon, dude. Cardio is a weapon. Yep. I mean, so I'm a diet guy. I've been in the diet world now. I mean, I've been professionally in the diet world for over 15 years. I started my supplement company in 2008. I spoke all over the world in the nutrition scene. I've been one of these eat your way to salvation type characters forever and involved in so many fad diets. And I've just like, I've always been a food person. But the truth of the matter is, where do you see a healthier looking person walking out of the health food store or walking out of the gym? Typically, it's like the person going into the GNC usually looks healthier than the person going into the Whole Foods. And I think I say this almost regrettably because I'm so into food and I think it's really, really matters. But I think you can get away with more dietary indiscretions the more you exercise, but you can't eat your way into the benefits of exercise. You only get them through that work.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I want to say the walking thing, I just want to first validate what you're saying because I completely agree. It's one of the reasons I think having a dog is so good because it's like who walks who, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yes.
How many less walks would I take without my dogs, dude? I mean, honestly, like half the time I'm like, oh God, I gotta take these dogs for a walk. And it's not because I'm not exercising because I'm really into cardio. You know, I'm doing probably, I say I average 4 to 5 hours of blue zone, like zone 2, zone 3 cardio a week. I'm really into it. It's like a drug for me now. So hours, dude. I do 1 hour sessions are my kind of favorite thing to do. So it's not like, oh, I got to walk. It's like the walking is not a big deal. It's the time of it, you know?
Yeah.
But that cardio, dude, my goodness, that is because you can get done an hour of cardio and eat some straight, like you were saying, gas station food and
Yeah.
get away with that. But you can't just be like, well, I only ate like, nettles and roots today, but didn't exercise and I feel awesome. It's like, probably not. I
Yeah,
don't know,
probably not.
that's my perspective. What do you think?
No, I agree with that. I don't think you can eat your way to health that like in the absence of exercise. And I
Yeah.
think again, that's context. Like we there's kind of this like, reductionist mentality in our society that again, parts are fungible. So like health is like these fungible units that okay, if I can take healthy food, then I will be healthy. But if I don't check the exercise box, like it's your outcomes are not going to be healthy, but you might be under the delusion that they will again
Mm-hmm.
because like you're like, hey, I do these healthy practices, but not these other ones. It's like no, consider the human animal, consider what it's supposed to do, and consider like even its kind of like metaphysical motivations, like what pay attention to what lifts your mood.
Yep.
Like going to the gym or going on walks. Um, you might look at it like, I maybe don't want to do this today. But I think anybody who's ever pushed through that has come out the other side thinking, hey, I'm really glad I did that. You know?
Oh yeah,
Like,
like the idea that you ever have regretted a workout.
yeah, I've never regretted a workout. Like, unless I
Yeah.
got hurt, but I don't regret the
I've
workout. I
regretted
regret
a lot
getting
of
injured.
meals though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. You're like, oh, I'm going to pay for this. Or, like,
Yeah.
it takes out the enjoyment of
Yeah.
eating, which it kind of take anything to a pathological level
Yeah.
and you're going to feel bad about it. But,
I've always felt that. So I look at us as this is just like sort of my internal framework, but I look at us as having 5 bodies. So I think we have a physical body, an emotional body, intellectual body, a sexual body, and a spiritual body. And I think about like I need to take care of all 5 of those. And I want to do it in a way they don't all require the same amount of time at least in my experience. Like I think like the physical body takes a lot of time. Like that animal needs some walking. Um, but it's like I want all of those to be equally nourished. And what I've always noticed is like you have these are gross caricatures. I don't mean this as any personal. I don't mean this as individual people, but I just generally like caricatures. You could have the like bodybuilder who's just straight dumb and has no spiritual life, but has like the body. Or you could have the extremely emotionally intelligent wimp, or the highly intellectual PhD nerd whose body you could just bend into pretzels because it's just pathetic, but the brain could just run you over, or in the spiritual world and in the world of ceremony and shamanism, or in the esoteric parts of the mystic parts of religions where you have like really spiritual people. often not a lot of physical development, or there might be extreme sexual repression. Similarly, you get the person who puts all the energy into sex, and all those other parts, like the spiritual part, gets completely out of balance. So it's like, I kind of want to keep all 5 of those plates spinning all the time, and be a whole person. But that seems like a pretty rare pursuit. And I don't meet a lot of people who are thinking about that. But it's something that's always, I used to think 4. I've never really thought of my sexual body. And I got corrected by a shaman in the jungle about that, who was like, no, man, there's a 5th one. Told me through a translator. Drew me a picture. Then I was like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how I see it. And I feel like the person who's, yeah, it's really easy to get waylaid from any one of those, or to forget about one, or to avoid the one that's hardest for you personally, or you have issues or trauma or something like that.
I really love that. Yeah, I haven't heard it described so succinctly like that. And yeah, I think that awareness and that mindfulness is essential. Like, you need to realize that you're a multifaceted person, and that maybe if you're someone who, lives in the intellect or lives in your feelings, like, depending, like, you might want to check in on those other parts of you to see, like, hey, maybe I've been neglecting this or treating this poorly, and let's see if we can't make me better in this realm, and solve maybe your overall a lot of people are experiencing seasonal depression right now in the northern parts of the country. So it's like, hey, maybe check in with other parts of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's time. Yeah, it's easy too because like diet and exercise are like these 2 sides of a coin. So I think about how stupid it would be to be like, males are the best, females are stupid, or females are the best, males are stupid. Night is awesome, but day is dumb. Like,
When I hear those when I hear those like all or nothing statements, I just see someone who's like frustrated. I see
yeah,
a human that's like imagine a fox in their cage that's going stir crazy or cage
yeah,
madness because they keep just walking along the border of their cage and they
yeah,
can't figure out how to get
circling.
out. And then
Yeah,
if you can't externalize a desire, you can internalize it, and then it just starts wreaking havoc. I know you had Our Numinous Nature on, and you guys talked about Carl Jung kind of as like a deep dive, and that was a fascinating listen. But yeah, I mean, he talks about that too, like like your the if you don't integrate the shadow, it's gonna rule your life, and you will call it fate.
yeah,
So
dude. And you know what's a funny thing about a shadow is, like, if you have a dark room with a little candle and you put a mouse in front of that candle, the shadow that it casts on the wall looks really, really big and really, really monstrous, and is terrifying. And then you follow it back to its source, and you're like, it's a little mouse. But a
yeah.
shadow can be cast big. So the more we repress the shadow in ourselves, the more monstrous it can become and appear. And then you trace it back and you're like, oh, it's because that thing that person said to me when I was 5. Oh my gosh, like, such a
Hmm.
small instance, or
And there's
even
that
when it's
awareness
something.
that the candle that is casting the shadow on that mouse, that even once you get back to the candle, you have to be aware that, like, say you're in a house, say like what you call you as a house, that candle is just in one room and it's illuminating one room, and now it's like kind of your job to delve the depths and figure out what's happening in the other rooms.
Wow, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and stuff is just never quite as, even when it's something horrible, I was talking to somebody recently about some childhood trauma that, I mean, major stuff, sexual abuse, like, it's major. But when you get the person down to where they can talk about it, I don't want to, like, I don't mean to sound like I'm downplaying it, because I'm not. It's so horrifying, but it's like, when the person actually processes it, it's not as scary to process as they have thought all these years repressing it that it would be to process it. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain things a person has never said because they're so afraid of doing it. And then when they finally do, it's like, not only is it not as bad as they thought it would be to say it out loud, but it's like liberating instantly, So
Yeah, I don't have any personal experience with that, but yeah, I would hope it would be liberating to kind of uncover, and
yeah.
to like
Well, you
speak
must have experience to, like, coming to terms with some things, and maybe not that, but it's like things that you have repressed or things that you don't want to deal with, and then you sort of deal with them, and it's like, man, not as bad as I thought it would be to say out loud or to share with a person or be seen or be vulnerable. Like, it's because, like, I think that's the fear all the time, is like the vulnerability. I'll be destroyed. I'll be crushed. I'll be laughed at.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of, we're like 6 days until the hemiplanetary uterine darkness, the winter solstice, and like typically this is when I go like my personality and like I guess my self esteem goes from like dishwasher safe to hand wash only. Um, but like this year, I'm kind of like I'm trying to meet everything with gratitude, like even the bad things, because like you know, again, there's a tension in life that like suffering can be good, you know. So like gratitude has been really important to me, and it feels like a platitude, because oftentimes like I feel like it's a sleepy-eyed fruitarian that's like blissed out on avocados and mangoes, like telling us, that like just be grateful,
It's a
and they're
secret,
like
man.
unemployed, and you're like you just came back from like Santorini for 2 weeks swimming with marine life. Like, what do you even do with your life? Like, meanwhile, like, you're clocking in your 9 to 5 and you get home and you're tired and you rest just to do it all again. Right. But like, like, I've kind of realized like, and I try to say this to myself on the days when it's hard is that like, all of us, like you, me, like anyone listening, we are the luckiest humans alive. And
Ever.
like, we could have had, yeah, ever. And like, if you're alive, you are you are among a subset of people that are also there are dead people, and then we could have had our eyesight stolen as a toddler by bacteria. We
Mm-hmm.
could have been in an accident in our adolescence and
Mm-hmm.
had our limbs amputated. I mean, like, you should really kind of just say your name out loud to yourself and say like, I am so lucky to be this, I am so lucky to embody this, and it is
Wow.
luck.
That's the thing. It's not merit. That, that's the I love the concept of God's grace because it's unmerited favor. So it's like the concept that you get to be loved even though you didn't do anything to deserve it. It's just unmerited because that's like luck. I appreciate that a lot because if you start thinking it comes from your deeds, then you can get right caught back up in that hubris.
Yeah, and
So,
like the Romans believed, like Fortuna, the goddess of fortune, like that's where the concept of someone being fortunate, like if
mm,
if you were a have in a society of have-nots, you too recognize, like both parties recognize that the people who had and the people who had not, it was just fortune. Like there, the saying there, but for the grace of God go I.
hmm
And so there was this latitude given, like obviously, you know, the have-nots are going to be kind of predated upon by the haves, typically, but there was also an understanding that the goddess of fortune giveth and taketh away, and it's truly not up to you. And there's the Norse, concept of, the length of my life and the day of my death were fated long ago. So you just act, like kind of with the courage that gives you, that you will not die a second
hmm
before you die.
hmm
you know, like,
Well said.
yeah, this
Yeah.
goes until it ends. So like, not a
Yeah.
moment sooner. So that's
Yeah.
helped me a lot in this winter time that I'm trying to learn to like.
Yeah, because these days are getting short right now. I
Yeah.
love this time. I really do. I've really grown to love it and appreciate it. We went and got our tree. We do a solstice tree every year, and that's I always say the biggest plant that I forage each year. And this year I cut down a tree that was probably 50 feet tall, a balsam fir, and took the top of it. So we've got 15 feet of it in our living room, and that tree is just cycling water into the house and just
Oh, really?
yeah, because the day you bring it in, especially, man, it's awesome. You put the tree down, fill the thing with water. It holds like a liter and a half maybe, and then that's gone in like an hour.
Oh, cool.
And you're like, where's it going? Well, it's transpiring through the leaves into the
Yeah.
house. So we just keep feeding it water. It just keeps, and when it's transpiring that water, it's doing so while also releasing essential oils into the house.
Oh, must smell amazing.
Yeah, and I just love to do that. So we go out and we get the tree. It's like part of how we get through these months, this is particularly, and everybody's like, oh, it's almost the winter solstice. The days start getting longer, but it's like, yeah, but they also start getting colder, and they're just going to get colder for the next couple months, So I like this time because I like the going inward, and it's such an opportunity to, Yeah, it's everything you've been talking about. There's all this subconscious, subliminal stuff that stirs and bubbles, and then in the peak of the summer, I get so carefree. It's easy to I'm not thinking about in the peak of summertime. I'm fishing and I'm hunting and I'm hiking and I'm swimming and I'm getting sun and and there's all this stuff to do. Like, I'm not thinking about the parts of myself I need to get in and like heat back up to red hot and pound with the hammer.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about that stuff. And now I am. Like, everything starts quieting down. And I love around the holidays, I've really grown to love I love, like, from when I get my tree to the solstice through Christmas, the New Year. I love this whole time because everything starts slowing down at work, communications, emails, everything starts slowing down. Like, everybody's busy. And and the days are short and it's dark and I have all this time to reflect on the stuff that's so important, but it's easy to get waylaid from.
Yeah, I love that natural rhythm that we all kind of wordlessly and without communicating, we just fall into
Mm-hmm.
this time of year. This for me, it is the beautiful part of winter. In Minnesota, we have like another 3 months of, after New Year's where there's like no holidays, like no real like festive holidays.
Mm.
It's like weird commercial holidays like Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day and, all these things. Yeah, now is like, I feel like it's easy mode winter for me because it's so
Yeah.
enjoyable. Like,
Yeah.
if winter could be like this the next 3 months, I would not have a problem with winter
I
at all.
schedule my winter vacations later every year because, if you do them too early, you come back and then it's just an ass kicker,
Yep. Yeah.
So I'm going to go to Hawaii a little later in the year this year and yeah, come back and then, then it's maple syrup season for me here. So
See, that's what, man. So foraging has been just such a multifaceted benefit to my life. Like, so the Ojibwe New Year is sugar bush. That's
mm-hmm.
when the
Okay.
New Year is marked, um, and so I look forward to that. And now March is like no problem for me. It's really like January and February
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
rough for me.
February in particular, man.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I just ride into January, but it's like February is a slog. That's when I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, get me out of here. But yeah, anyway, we've got our first snowstorm happening outside right now. We're going to get 12 inches tonight. And
Ooh.
I'm pretty pumped about it, though. I gotta say, I don't know. Every year I get more into it. I love ice fishing, so that gets me through it. And then my wife's got me cross country skiing last year, so that was like, oh, cool, like more cardio, great. So, I just find ways to push through it, man. But I decided a couple years ago that I would not complain anymore about it. It just was like, I can't listen to myself complain about this anymore because I can't stand listening to people complain about it.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like, dude, you're alive.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
alive.
Even when
Man.
I catch myself complaining about it, like heck, I just kind of did. But like I notice it now, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
and then just invites back like the majesty and the miracle of life.
Yeah. And that gratitude practice you were talking about, because that's the thing is like, I'm not above it. I mean, I just made a rule not to complain about winter, but boy, I complain plenty. And I was catching myself the other day. I'm like, and I have to step back and be like, Daniel, what is wrong with you, man? Like, I've lived a very privileged life. My start sucked. It was rough. I had a rough start, but where I'm at now, I got nothing to complain about and only things to be grateful for. And yet I can find myself resenting the very things that are great. And it's like, it's embarrassing.
Isn't that weird how we can acclimate to anything, and then
Yeah.
the human animal will just kind of like pick at the paint on the walls no
Well, and
matter
the
what.
better it gets, the worse people get, because like when you get ultra opulent, you're like, this gold goblet only has 3 rubies.
Oh yeah, or you're in like
fashionless.
you're in some beautiful vacation location, and then like you're 99% there, but since you're like really wealthy, there's 1% of you that is like always thinking, oh well, maybe I could be having more fun this other place or at this other party that I'm invited
Yeah.
to.
Or if this
You
yacht
know?
was bigger, or if it
Yeah.
was a different color or whatever. Yeah, that's what I think. Like the lower your standard of living is, the more easy you can appreciate things in a way, because it's like as things get better, you start to pick apart things, even like the more cultured we get, the more we notice everything that people shouldn't be doing.
Oh yeah,
You
just
know?
like in a small way, there's a coffee shop that opened up in Minneapolis, and I went there just because it was like a nearby coffee shop, and I accidentally elevated my taste in coffee.
Oh
Like I
no.
didn't mean to do that
Right. Oops.
because it was also like unsustainable because this is the only place of its caliber in Minneapolis. And then that same year, something tragic happened to the owner and they couldn't keep the business open anymore, so they had to sell it. And now here I am. Now here I am, like not liking the coffees that I used to,
Yeah.
and it was by accident.
Right. Yep. I know what you
You know,
mean, man.
so you have to be kind of careful about what you consume. You have to kind of think ahead a little bit.
Yeah. The world of being a connoisseur, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. That's how
Hey,
I
speaking
am.
of,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry, go on.
No, go.
Oh, I was going to say, speaking of connoisseur, this black walnut protein powder, I just
Did you
want
get
to thank
some?
you. Oh, yes, I did. The second I saw you post about it, I got it.
Dude, thank you.
I've
It
never
is
been more excited.
it's the most legit for me. It's the most legit supplement I have encountered in 15 years. As far as like, man, it's everything that you want. People want to believe that the products they're buying are clean, and then when you're in the industry, you're like, dude, you have no idea. This product is like really, really clean, man. It's so amazing.
It checked my boxes.
Yeah,
I'm drinking it right now,
oh
actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah. I really appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I got to go out this year to work with Hammonds. They are so cool. Do you know anybody out there? You familiar with their operation at all?
I don't. I would love to visit someday.
Man, it's something really remarkable. And they are really good people, like in fixtures of their small community. They do a lot for the community, but they're 3 generations privately owned business. So it's like the grandfather started dealing in black walnuts, but at that time there was a lot of competition for it. And, now they're like the only name in the game. Like the rest of the world has forgotten about black walnuts. So they're like the only company. But the fact that they source all their product from people who forage it is remarkable. When I was there, it was during the foraging season, and they put out like 30, they've got all these, hulling stations, both electric and gas, because of the, a lot of the people who run the hulling stations for them are Mennonites or Amish. And so they don't have electricity, so they got to use gas. So they have both. So they set up like 30 of these, and I think it's in 14 states, I want to say. But watching people come in and like sell this product, it's amazing. But the challenge that they have at Hammond's is they've got to constantly make sure that they are keeping the public interested in going out to forage these. Otherwise, their supply would dry up. They don't have a way to get them otherwise. So if you're looking for something to do in the fall, make a few extra bucks, bring these guys your black walnuts.
Yeah, that was one of my first, when I had first started foraging, I was like, how do I make money doing this? And black walnuts were like one of the first things that
Oh, no kidding. Did
came
you
on my
sell them to
radar.
Hammonds?
Oh, no, I didn't get around to doing it just because I didn't have like, there is a station in Minnesota, but I think it's in southern Minnesota, kind of
Mm-hmm.
near Iowa. And I didn't have any way to get there. City kid, didn't get out of the city much. So it was basically like, where could I bike or walk to?
Okay, yeah.
And I didn't have a pickup truck or like a large truck to move hundreds of pounds
Yeah.
to them. But I do always tell people like, hey, like if you're set up for it, you should definitely get into the black walnut game.
The nut wizard is the key, man. The larger size nut wizard. I went out thinking we were going to be picking them up by hand, and it was like, oh no, they use the nut wizards, and those things are insane. I mean,
Is that little like handle with like the rolly thing on the end?
yeah, it reminds me of that little popcorn vacuum toy that kids would get. I don't know. Again,
Oh yeah, no, I
you know
do
what I'm talking
remember that.
you're just running around, and the nuts are just we made an episode of the show of WildFed that'll be out. We're going to air in February with our 10 new episodes, and one of them is black walnuts. And one of the things I did was put a GoPro on the ground with the nuts so I could like suck that thing up into the nut wizard.
Cool, cool.
It's really wild, but watching it bounce around in there. But yeah, it's not huge money or anything. I mean, the average person I saw coming in was maybe making $100 or something, but I met some folks who'd making like $10,000 to $15,000 that year because they had really worked out all of these locations and people were letting them harvest off their trees and stuff. And so, or off the ground, near their trees. And so, some people take it really seriously and they make a substantial amount of money doing it. But, yeah, anyway, the Hammonds operation is awesome. And then the CO2 extraction that we're using, what's so cool about that is that's that same thing that they're doing in the cannabis industry. I mean, that's a clean extraction because you're just compressing CO2 into a liquid and then using that as a solvent and then taking the pressure off and letting it turn back, into a gas. So it's gone. So there's no residue of any solvent. And I've had people be like, I don't get it. Why would you turn this into a protein powder? Why not just eat the nuts? It's like, well, how many black walnuts are you eating? Because from what I can tell, we have a North American native crop of the highest protein nut in the market, and no one's eating it. And it comes from right here, and it uses no ag land and no water and no pesticides. And we could be eating it as protein, but no one, if I just leave it as whole nuts, like no one's going to eat it because they taste funny. Basically.
Yeah, and it's also like that. It's not either or. Again, like people again want to either or everything. Like,
Right.
I actually think you can buy black walnuts, from Hammond's all over the place.
You can buy them at Walmart.
Exactly, and I was going to say, like,
them at Walmart.
Like the idea, like, I think the logical conclusion of what we're doing in the foraging community, we're trying to popularize, all these kind of forgotten or neglected foods that are amazing and they should be known and people will like them because we do. The logical conclusion is this all actually becomes fairly mundane. It's not necessarily cool anymore.
Right.
And I think Hammond's is like them getting their walnuts into Walmart. Like there's always a record scratch like moment when I tell people that in my classes.
There's wild food at Walmart.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, where you could get these? Like the best place to get them, at Walmart. And people will be like, because they have like, they think like Walmart, there's kind of like a socioeconomic like classism happening there, or just there's multifold reasons that people don't like something, and that's okay, that's valid, but it's really accessible for everybody to go to a Walmart and buy black walnuts, and they're already shelled, and they couldn't be easier to eat, but that's going to be the fate of like a lot of our.
Those that's another shop. That's another store that we'll hit up on the road sometimes. The amount of organic foods that are the same brands and the same packaging that I would be buying at a Whole Foods or some other health food store that are now at Walmart, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
and can you imagine the buyer at Walmart that's like that? Can you imagine the buyer at Walmart? I don't know who did this, but like who made the inroad with the black walnut, the one black walnut factory in the world, from Walmart, and it's like, hey, let's make this a thing.
Yeah,
that is a big sell, especially to a company like Walmart. You know, like imagine trying to sell that, like, hey, let's buy a ton of black walnuts, and the people you're selling it to are like, what are black walnuts?
Right. Yeah, and the fact that you can go in there and buy like cacao nibs and like chia seeds and all these things, it's pretty surprising, but it also shows like how much demand has been created too. But one of the cool things with the black walnuts that I experienced when I was there was them cooking a couple of their like family recipes. I mean, these folks live and breathe black walnuts. It's
that's awesome.
Pretty wild. So Brian's wife cooked for us one night the family's like traditional Christmas dinner meal, which is a wild rice with black walnuts, kind of savory dish they do with green peppers and onions. And I had always thought of black walnuts as going into like more like confection type stuff, being used in like baked goods and stuff like that. But they use it in savory dishes as an umami flavor. And I was, the main thing in that dish that I left out was mushrooms. So the mushrooms and the black walnuts pair really nicely together. So I think there's quite a lot of culinary exploration left to be done with the black walnut.
I can see that perfectly. Yeah. Like mushrooms and black walnuts, their flavor is so adjacent to me. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And to hit on the mushrooms a little bit again, like talking about the difference between Whole Foods and Walmart. So someone should go into, and I have done this, but go into Whole Foods and look at their mushrooms, specifically like their pre-packaged mushrooms, not like the fresh ones you're necessarily buying. But I looked at some containers of like pickled mushrooms or, similar products, and they're not even describing correctly the mushrooms that are in there. So like you think you're getting a better product from Whole Foods just because of the marketing. Again, marketing, very important. And then also there was a test recently done on the dried mushroom products available at Amazon, probably very similar because Amazon owns Whole Foods now. They found in like 20 dried mushroom products that these were not the mushrooms that were in there. Like
Wow.
they said there was a porcini salt or dried porcini. Not the case. There was like something like 20 species in there, even including an amanita that
Wow.
was damaged kidneys.
Oh, an amanita was in there?
There was a kidney damaging amanita that was tested positive in one of the
Wow.
examples. So it
What?
was, yeah, something like 75% of the mushroom products, the dried ones that claimed to have porcini in them, didn't have any porcini in them.
Whoa.
Yep.
Wow. I did a podcast years ago where I had interviewed a guy about his thing was like, I can't remember his name now, but his thing was like fake foods. And, I think one of the big ones people are aware of now is like olive oil. Honey's another one. These foods that are specialty foods that are often what you're buying is fraudulent. And there's just so many of those things. I'm so glad to see that. It looks to me, maybe it's too premature to say this, and I'm taking a victory lap when I shouldn't, but it seems like some of the Beyond Burger stuff and some of the, whatever the other one is, Impossible Burger, because they started firing those things out of like McDonald's and Burger King and stuff, but they seem to have dropped those, huh? Like I don't think
Oh,
those are
have they?
really catching on. Yeah, I don't think they have them in the fast food world so much anymore. I think that didn't work. Like people were basically just like not interested. Particularly, you'd think like as if didn't make sense to me that the McDonald's demographic would be like, oh yeah, I'm opting for the Beyond Burger. It's like,
yeah, what
you're
a
already
wild.
going to McDonald's. Like, I don't think that's you're really on your radar, but okay, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the market research there, I know some people that say like, so they're vegan, right? And they go to Taco Bell because they had like a lot of potato based products with like, basically
Mhm,
their potato products replace the like alleged meat products. There was that
mhm.
scandal that Taco Bell meat is like 60% not meat or something.
Makes sense.
Um, so I think there was like a very specific demographic they were targeting and hoping to like bust wide open, right?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I'm not mad that those aren't doing well. I'm not really a fan of
So
them.
glad
You're
they're
never
not
going to
doing well.
replace my steak. You're never going to,
Your
I'm going hunting for
your
the.
one ingredient steak with like a
Yeah. Oh, for
40
sure.
ingredient plant-based heart disease causing toxic seed oil product. I mean, give me a
Oh
break.
God. Yeah.
Oh, it's
I'm
really
actually
funny
going
stuff.
hunting for the first time for wild boar in March.
Oh yeah? Where are you going?
Yeah. I think it's this little town called Nixon, Texas. It's like 2 hours east of Dallas,
Okay.
and we're hopefully gonna use a spear.
Really?
Yeah, like a 7 foot tall spear with like
A
those boar
javelin.
catching lugs. No, run and stab it.
Oh my goodness. This will be your first hawk hunt?
Yeah, so I think my
Wow.
days might be numbered, but
Yeah, interesting. Okay. I'll be curious how that goes. Do you have Jesse Griffith's book, The Hog Book?
I don't. Is it called the Hog Book?
It's called The Hog Book. I actually, he's such a great guy. I was just talking with him the other day and just telling him, like, I think his book is one of I don't think that a lot of the books in the world of hunting are a contribution to the literature. It's just not many of them are. His actually is. And it's also, I mean, he got a James Beard Award for it. It's also a contribution to the culinary literature as well. But that book is the most comprehensive thing about understanding hogs, hog hunting, and hog eating, particularly of anything I've read. And he does a really cool thing where all his recipes are keyed. And the key is like a piglet, a small sow, and then a large sow and a large boar. I think that's how he breaks it down. Because he's basically like, you could kind of make any deer recipe with any venison, but you can't make any pork recipe with any hog. Because you're going to get hogs that are big and disgusting and fat, and you're going to get hogs that are small and lean and don't have a drop of fat on them. I mean, they're just all different, and it's helpful to know that going in when you first cook with them. So anyway, I highly recommend the book.
Yeah, I mean, your recommendation, I'm going to take it because, especially, if we put all this work into getting these hogs,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a natural cook. Actually, like, I'm very much in like the cook category where like, throw some of this in, throw some of this in, see how it goes. Like, I'm definitely not like a fine-tuned instrument,
Yeah.
let's say that.
Oh well, man. I mean, a crock pot and a boar shoulder or a hamstring is just about as awesome. It's just about as awesome as it gets. I would Yeah, I would also recommend any dry aging you can do.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so basically, if you can get a baking sheet and a wire rack that sits on it, and you just take a big cut of meat, like let's say it's a shoulder, and you just set it on there, because you can break your whole hog down, put it in the freezer, right? Like vacuum seal or whatever you're going to do, put it in the freezer. Then you don't have to dry age it first. You can dry age it after. So let's say you take a piece out of the freezer, you thaw it, and then you get it out of whatever you've got it wrapped in, and you put it on that wire rack in the refrigerator for a few days, and just let the low humidity and coolness of the refrigerator pull moisture out of it. You are going to get such a better product than if you just straight cook it.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
really, really important. I had a guy, actually, something I'll do now too, because sometimes in making the show, I'm on the road. So like in Hawaii recently, I came back with axis deer and black buck, and I didn't have time to dry age them there or even hang them. It's like we shot them, skinned them, put them in the freezer. The meat is just wet still. And so if I grind that and then try to cook it, it steams. It doesn't sear. So what
Oh.
I'll do is I'll take that, even the ground meat, and I'll put that in a colander, sitting in a bowl in the fridge for a few days and let it dry out. And what happens is, as the moisture leaves, the meat not only continues to tenderize and stuff from enzymatic activity, but you'll get a concentration of flavor that is just what they're doing with really high end steaks when you go out to like a steakhouse or something. It's dry aging.
Yeah, I used to work at a steakhouse, and we had 90-day dry aged,
Yeah.
ribeyes and stuff. And I mean, I can speak for that. I actually never thought to do it myself. I don't know why. Sometimes I don't make these obvious connections, but yeah, I'm gonna definitely do that.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, what you do is like here in November, if you shoot a deer during our deer season, usually it's cold enough you can hang it for several days or even weeks before you need to break it down, because the temperatures stay under 40 or around 40. But yeah, it's harder to do, obviously, if it's warm, or a place like Texas or something, you just can't do that. So if somebody doesn't have, sometimes people have a walk-in cooler though, and you can do that. Or sometimes people take an old refrigerator and gut it, and
Oh
then
yeah.
you can just put stuff on racks in there or hang stuff inside there is another way to do it. But um, I dry age fish now. I mean, that's something that I never
Oh,
would have
cool.
imagined, but like I've been dry aging swordfish, and the flavor improvement
What?
is remarkable. So another James Beard award winning character out of Australia, Josh Nyland. He's written 2 books. Yeah, I think he's got a third one coming out. I think he got a James Beard for both of them. Anyway, his whole thing is fish butchery, and he's all about dry aging fish. And when you first read it, you're like, no, that's gross. You'd think things would get fishy and weird. Dude, no smell, nothing but like improved flavor. So anyway, dry aging.
I would love to try that. I probably should have tried that while we were in Hawaii. I don't think there's much chance of it now that I'm 1,100 miles away from the closest ocean. But
Did you eat a lot of poke there?
we did
Yeah.
definitely. I think had our fill. Um, yeah, but like we had jellyfish poke.
Oh yeah, I didn't try that. Oh, I'd love to
It
try
was
that.
it was wild. It was like this little place, kind of like in Waikiki, that had it,
Okay.
and it was, I think, a newer place. Like I don't know. It was wild. It was not busy. I don't know why, but it
Waikiki
had
is nuts,
jellyfish.
huh?
Yeah, Waikiki is nice.
I can't wait.
Yeah,
I'm gonna spend a couple days there before I kind of make my way into somewhere a little more remote. But I think
yeah.
even that's a lot of fun to me.
No, Waikiki was great. The people watching is phenomenal. There are like decent food options there.
Oh yeah,
I actually kind of found like Hawaiian food. It's a small market, which is what I kind of realized after the fact. I realized like, okay, Oahu is the size of the Minneapolis metro area, and it has a quarter of the people. And
wow.
I was like wondering why the food was like I couldn't find any like really good. And also, this is up to me. I mean, you know it was just on me not being able to find the best spots, I feel. But I feel like I wasn't able to find like, are you familiar with the restaurant Owamni here in Minneapolis? It's a Sean Sherman
Oh
James
yeah,
Beard Award
yeah,
winner,
yeah. I haven't eaten there.
indigenous food.
Yeah, I mean, I know who you're talking about. I have his book, but I haven't eaten there.
Yeah, highly recommend it. But I couldn't really find. I thought I would be able to find an analog to that
Like a
in Hawaii.
Hawaiian restaurant. Yeah,
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 and instead I found like most of the options were like you had your carb, which was typically rice, and then you had a protein, and then like some sort of sauce to bring it all together.
yeah.
And I like vegetables were rare, and so I feel like I couldn't really.
Did you try the
Yeah.
kalo, the taro root?
Nope, nope, couldn't even find that anywhere we went.
Yeah, yeah. It's like more
Again,
like
that's
a
on me.
well,
Yeah.
but you're. I also maybe somebody will hear this and kind of write in with some restaurant ideas, because I also didn't find that. And like when I wanted to try the kalo, because it's such a traditional food there, one of those important canoe plants, but maybe the most important in a way. But it was the kind of thing where you'd find it in little markets, like just in a little styrofoam cup, and it's already
Oh yeah.
prepared. Or breadfruit's another like really interesting carbohydrate out there. Fascinating, to get to have like a boiled breadfruit is pretty awesome. But
Just growing, by the way, on the trees everywhere. Like
mhm.
everywhere you look, there's produce that you'd be buying
Yeah,
just for free.
yeah, it's
I mean,
amazing. Huh?
yeah.
Yeah, best kept secret. But like, it's such a strange place, because you're palpably aware that like the Hawaiian people are there, man. It's just so weird. You're like, oh, hey, thanks, I'm in your space. It's a very strange scenario there, where it has in some ways, I've likened it in some ways to going to the reservation, but
Hmm.
but it's not a reservation. It's so weird. It's like you're in there amongst the indigenous local people. Their life way is like present around you,
Omnipresent.
yet so is like the Hilton and the Hyatt and Rolex and whatnot. It's
Yeah,
very
and
weird.
it was really difficult, and I kind of consider myself like knowledgeable just in terms of like, in our dialogue here in Minnesota, with Ojibwe and Dakota peoples, I kind of felt like I have a leg up compared to the average person that doesn't have that experience in trying to interface with
Hmm.
like this indigenous population that's living amongst the majority populations. And I feel like that's why I kind of feel like it was a personal failure that I couldn't find these, like what I considered to be like, indigenous owned and operated, indigenous food places. If those exist, I would love to hear about them. Maybe they're on a different island,
Yeah.
and I don't claim to know everything or be the best at it, but like, yeah, I couldn't find them. It was so difficult.
Yeah, we only got to eat any of sort of traditional food by visiting with actual families, and that only came about through sort of fortuitous luck and the fact that we were there making that show. But
I got the sense that
otherwise, it would have been hard.
that was the case.
Yeah. Well, I am very excited about your hog hunt, man. I hope that next time you go to Hawaii, maybe you consider doing a little hunting out there too,
I
because
would love to.
the axis deer issue is significant. It's significant on Maui. It's significant on Molokai. It's significant in Lanai. Bad. It's bad. Like it's all the things that, sometimes people talk about like an invasive or exotic species and how bad and deleterious it is. And then you're like, is it though? This is one where you're like, no, it's no question. It's all the things. It's bad. And the quality of the game coming off those islands is really nice.
Yeah, I'm all for like invasive species removal. I know people are saying like displaced species
Hmm.
now,
Yeah,
like
sure.
in order to not like
Make it
extend
sound
like,
like they're like like it's a campaign they're waging.
yeah, kind of. I kind of
Yeah.
get it though. Like on one hand, like you don't want to like kind of keep animals sacred in a way. Like I know
Yeah.
that's how I approach hunting. I know you don't have to like approach hunting with like kid gloves like that, or necessarily like philosophically or intellectually inclined like that. Because sometimes people bring things way too much into the intellect, and I think hunting doesn't need to be that. But whatever. This is going to be my second time hunting ever, so I can't even talk about it.
Yeah, I think especially though, if you're somebody who didn't grow up doing it and then you start approaching it later in life, you can't help but come at it with a lot of reverence. That's important. And I think over time you kind of figure out where you want to land in that.
Okay.
But like, I think that's important. And I think that, you know, doing this project, WildFed, has been me trying to hold a doorway open for people like myself and like you to come into hunting, and there to be some kind of a place for, I don't know, guys with like who wear a man bun to like figure out how to hunt. So like, so that's what that, and the tendency is to come in, like, I know when I came into it, man, ultra reverent. And then over time you start, as you establish predator prey relationships, that shifts a little bit. Cause like for sure you've met the kind of people who say a prayer for every blade of grass that they pick. And
Sure.
sometimes
Yep.
you're like, okay, it's you're taking this a little far. It's like a little too much. And I think that, probably most of us are going to err on that side coming into it, and then kind of establish where we at with our predator prey relationships later.
Yeah, probably a good way to come from. I guess I'd prefer it to the alternative where, well, I don't know. Maybe if someone did come into hunting or foraging and they were like super like had zero reverence and it was just a very like empirical or commercial experience for them and then they move towards it being reverent, maybe that's a win. I think that
Yeah.
is a net
Oh
win,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And I think what the thing that everybody's trying to avoid is the appearance of being like sporting, like treating the animal like a ball in a sport or something.
I get that.
And I think that, so we're also like grossed out by that concept. And the media has done a masterful job over the last several decades of making it appear to the non-hunter that that's how all hunters are doing it. Because everybody comes in saying, it's amazing. Everybody comes in saying the same stuff and then realizing, oh, it's not like that. That's what I thought. And it's like, how did I think that? And it's like, oh, Elmer Fudd or whatever it was, that left me thinking that. But yeah, no, I like that you're taking this real reverent approach with javelins and pikes. It's
pikes. Yeah, for sure. We're going to form a phalanx.
Phalanx. I'm just curious how you're going to get close enough to a hog to do that. But
I am extremely curious right there with you.
Please send me a text when this happens. I'll be curious. Man, it's been a lot of fun talking to you today. We ranged all over the place. I really appreciate this. I'm feeling very lighthearted now.
Yeah, I really enjoyed myself, Daniel. Thanks for talking with me.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back again soon. So send me some photos and I'll let you know how Hawaii goes.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh new content. Have a podcast guest or topic suggestion, or maybe a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host the WildFed TV show for? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. If you still haven't seen season 1 or 2 of the WildFed TV show, go to myoutdoortv.com, grab yourself a free trial subscription, and then check out all 20 episodes. Season 3 of WildFed premieres on Outdoor Channel in early 2023. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out our store for WildFed shirts, hoodies, hats, stickers, and more. WildFed. Food is all around you.